You're listening to Wildrose, the second hour on CBC Radio 1. I'm Donna McElligott. Today we're broadcasting from Edmonton. A new royalty regime for junior oil companies and the environmental concerns over oil sands development have dominated the news day today, certainly here in Edmonton. Those are also preoccupying the thoughts of one of our radio bloggers on Wildrose, Ken Chapman. He's with Cambridge Strategies, and he's also the man behind his own web presence, Ken-Chapman.blogspot.com. Hi, Ken. Nice to see you in person.
You too.
Well, what was your take on why the Premier is rolling back the royalties for some new oil and gas projects?
It's response to the fact that the prices have gone down, that investors are skittish, obviously, that the banks have frozen. They're not going to be putting money into these projects, and it's more than a symbolic gesture. It's a significant amount of money, but it's spread over 5 years, and it's a notice that they're serious about supporting jobs in the drilling sector. You're listening to the interview with the fellow from the junior oil company, is that clearly these people have to sharpen their pencil, that they cannot sustain the kinds of prices and revenues that they've had, which have been enormous in the build-up to these oil and gas prices. But it's an indication that this is a high-risk area. That there's lots of equipment, lots of capital, and lots of people in that area. And it's not so much worrying about whether the jobs are going to go to BC or Saskatchewan. It's really making sure that the Alberta industry stays healthy during this time. And it's not much money in the grand scheme of things, but it's a pretty darn big, symbolic gesture too. Mm-hmm. But it's showing that the government, I think, of Alberta is pretty nimble and being responsive.
Mm-hmm. But some people would say, look at the way the economy has been so overheated in the last number of years, and do we really need more oil and gas drilling in the province?
I don't think so. I think that the other side of it is that we've got a lot of gas and plants and gas drilling and oil drilling out there on a conventional basis, and we've got enough activity on it. The question is, will the market be there? The market's declining. The American Auto Association is going to be a 14% decline in mileage and gas usage in the United States just over this Thanksgiving weekend that they're coming up with. So I think there's going to be a lot because of pricing. There's a lot of conservation attitude. I just don't think we need more of it. It's an economic move to support jobs, but is it a fact of a good economic plan? And is it about the royalties? Not really. It's a job. Mm-hmm. It's a job thing.
Why do the juniors get it and not the majors?
Because they're the most vulnerable. The majors can handle this. There's different categories in the royalties. There's the oil sand royalty. There's the majors, and there's these deep well drilling conventional guys. And I think there was a big concern when the royalty review came out about the juniors and these deep well conventional guys, and they're being supported yet again.
Mm-hmm. Are you expecting that maybe we might see further changes before the regime kicks in?
I don't think so. I think that this is a response to the dramatic decline in a month of oil prices. But I don't think there's going to be significant changes. The things that worry me is, are we going to get changes in the environmental obligations that are put on these oil companies? Is that we have thousands and thousands of unreclaimed wells that should be cleaning up, and nobody's putting any pressure on these people to do that. I would love to see, we'll give you a break on the royalties, but by the way, what are you doing to clean up those old dead wells that you're no longer using, those closed wells? Because otherwise they just get orphaned and end up being the responsibility of the Alberta taxpayer.
So you think that could happen as a result of this change?
No, I don't think it could happen. I'd like to see this change made conditional. If you've got good, clean companies that are meeting their obligations on reclamations, those are the good corporate citizens I'd like to support with this bit of an advantage, but not just across the board. I think that there's a whole bunch of attitude here that has not been responded to by the industry in terms of their reclamation responsibility in conventional oil and gas. And I really worry is that will the Alberta government, because of the environment around, quote, no pun intended, but the economic environment around the oil and gas industry and prices and investment problems and raising capital problems, is they're going to spread out and water down their environmental requirements even more to make it easier, because that's a cost to the industry as well.
Mm-hmm. And then a big issue, of course, carbon capture and storage. I mean, the industry is expected to carry a heavier burden on that, that's for certain.
Yeah, but those are the big guys.
Yeah, the big guys. But we heard from Iris Evans this week that despite the fact that we lost more than $6 billion from our coffers in the projected budget surplus, they're still going ahead with $2 billion spending on carbon capture and storage.
And they should. What's interesting about carbon capture and sequestration, I was in Calgary last week at the University of Calgary and the Pembina Institute Carbon Capture and Sequestration Thought Leaders Conference, and it was an amazing thing. But the reality is that carbon's going to cost us $125 a ton, not 15 that we're putting into it now. And the question is, where do we start and how fast do we ramp this up? This is a really good kickstart. I compliment the Alberta government for putting $2 billion in. The American government's only putting $1 billion into carbon capture. China is putting $6 billion into it. So this is a pretty significant thing for a small place like Alberta. And the fact that it stayed and they're not waffling on it, I think, is a real good tribute. And they've also expanded the projects. They were looking at maybe 3 or 4 projects that they would approve to go to the second level. Well, they've approved 20 of them. So that shows that industry has really responded as well.
Okay, but just before you go, you sort of hit on it there just before I asked you about carbon capture and storage, and that is the tremendous number of unreclaimed wells that are out there and abandoned wells and so on. I mean, who will take on that responsibility?
Well, I think we have to just raise the standards and the expectations. This is a dirty little secret that we've let fester for way too long and just moved it to the side of the desk in the provincial government. And I think we've got to, and I'm talking about not the oil sands and the tar sands. I'm talking about the conventional guys.
Yeah.
The seismic line, the roadways, the well sites that they're no longer using. They only have to put it back to grass, for gosh sake. The previous interview on the grizzly bears and the caribou, all that can be solved on the issue of reclamation. And we're not getting at it nearly as fast as we need to. And I think that if we don't start paying serious attention to it, it'll just continue to lag. I think that notwithstanding the investment problems and the industry problems, they've got to start stepping up to the plate and getting after the reclamation issues.
Mm-hmm. This is obviously a very hot topic, Ken, and you are blogging about this and other things. What else have you got on your blog this week?
Well, I'm going to be talking about the other issue, which is totally unrelated, is the issue of the development of the disability sector, paying people who work with these people a livable wage. We're finding that's a file that I'm working on. In terms of full disclosure, I'm working on this file. It's not something that's a volunteer capacity, but we are losing people and we're putting huge risks on people, including the communities, and we're actually clogging up our hospitals because these people with really serious disabilities are now having to be downloaded, and the only place they can put them is into the hospital system. And so we simply have to start paying a livable wage for people who take care of our most vulnerable citizens, so that if you're working for a living, you can make a living. And the Alberta government the Premier's promised to close the gap between what he pays the people who work for the government, the people who work in the community agencies, and that gap is getting wider. So I'm going to be blogging on that too.
Always great to have you with us, Ken. Thank you so much.
Good talking to you.
That's Ken Chapman, one of Wildrose radio bloggers. He joins us every other week. What do you think about what you heard from Ken today, whether or not it's this change to the royalty structure for juniors in the conventional oil business, or what he just said, which you can read more about on his blog, which is paying people who have disabilities a living wage? Give our Wildrose Talkback line a call at 1-800-461-9219. Check out Ken's blog by going to, what is it, Ken?
Ken-Chapman.
Ken-Chapman.
.blogspot.com.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's Ken Chapman. And you can also send emails to wildrose@cbc.ca.